We are at the Ceely Rose House. The Ceely Rose House is on Malabar Farm. Malabar is now a state park. Yes, it is a state park.
State park.
The Ceely Rose House, in case you don't know, I know everybody knows Lizzie Borden and the Lizzie Borden nursery rhyme, but not many know about Ceely Rose, who was also a culprit of familicide. Is that what it is when you kill your family? Maybe, yes, no, maybe so. Okay, so she killed her father and her brother by putting arsenic in their cottage cheese. And this was done because she had a crush on a neighbor.
The mother survived.
She did. The mother was poisoned.
Yes,
so,
she did actually survive the first poisoning.
From what I've read about that, the mother knew what had happened with the original poisoning and helped Ceely cover it up, because Ceely was like the only thing she had in the world, and you know.
She was special, considered special needs at the time.
She was 6-year-old level, was that what it?
We've read 6-year-old level. Also heard that she was also found completely competent. Of course, you know, that was a long time ago. They didn't have the test then that they do today.
So I guess you could kind of say her mother had a hand, if that's the case, that she did help her cover it up, that she actually had a hand in her own death, because not long after Ceely finished her mother off.
Yeah, she was recovered, but not fully. And they brought her food. She tasted it. What they said it was milk toast.
Milk toast, yeah.
She tasted it. They covered it up for her to eat later. When she went to eat it later, she said it's sweeter. So they suspect that she suspected and went ahead and ate it anyway.
Now, the house is said to have quite a bit of paranormal activity. I've walked around the house, and again,
the funny thing is, they say it's Ceely Rose, but she didn't die here. She actually died in a care facility in Lima Ohio. I know that's a touchy subject.
It's a lima bean.
Well, I know people from Lima, so it's pronounced both ways. But, you know, to me, if someone's going to haunt the house, it would be the mother, the father, or the brother, because they actually passed here. So, kind of conflicting stories. We're trying to get as much information. We're going to take a tour, try to get y'all some more information, and learn some more ourselves.
Yeah. See anything in the window?
No. I'm kind of, you know, I walked around the house. It still has the old stone foundation. I did get a picture of that. This is vinyl sided. I personally think that it might be log underneath, and would like to see what's underneath there.
They do offer overnight stays here. Maybe we'll ask that.
I know they do have some cabins here. I don't know exactly where you can stay. If you've seen our Ohio State Reformatory video, you see they filmed the Shawshank Redemption there.
This is part of the Shawshank Trail.
Yeah, there's actually buildings on the property that were in the movie as well. Coming in, there was a sign across the street
With the cornfield.
where the tree was, and apparently
if you haven't seen the movie, see the movie. It's a good movie.
So, yeah, there's lots to do up here. It's a pretty neat place.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to go take the tour. Take the tour. Take the tour.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
All right.
Who's living in there? Can't see in that window. It's not easily opening, so I'm not gonna open it.
And there we go.
that Mr. Bromfield was born, a murder happened in this house. This is called the Ceely Rose House. He has nothing to do with the murder or anything like that, other than when he bought the farm, the house came with it. 1896, her family had been living here about 15 years. Her dad, the Rose family, dad was a miller. He worked the water mill that sat on the property over here. He was the last one to work the last mill in Richland County. Well, at 23 years old, she's still living at home, and she's, by today's standards, we'd call her a special needs adult, like that. As she walked down the road here to the one-room schoolhouse that's out there, there's a little red bricks building. It's a one-room schoolhouse at that time. Now it's the lady that owned the Shawshank Tree. She owns the schoolhouse too, and she rents it out as an apartment like that. But as Ceely would walk down the road, she'd stop and just talk to kids along the way. But there was a young man who lived in the house up there, Guy Berry, and she fixated on him to the point where she stalked him. She decided she wanted to be like other girls and have a boyfriend like that. He didn't know it. He was totally, it was a one-sided affair like that. There's a book that just came out. The guy that wrote a play about this about 20 years ago has just published a book. It was just released this week. We sold out in the gift shop, but it's the murders. I think it's called The Murders at Malabar Farm. The Ceely Rose at Malabar Farm. I'm not sure. Has nothing to do with Malabar Farm though. It was just when her family lived here. Well, what happened was, as she stalked him, somewhere in her mind, she decided to make my family go away. So she went to the water mill. Her dad had just bought a product called Rough on Rats. It's an arsenic-based poisoning. She put it in their morning breakfast, and that morning, just before the 4th of July, it was like around June, just about this time of year, right now. And she put it in their morning breakfast. They ate something every day called schmearcase. It's a cottage cheese-like mixture. And so they tell me it mixes in pretty good, like that. Well, they ingested it. As the day went on, by the end of the day, they were all feeling very intestinally distressed. The doctor was sent for. When the doctor came over from Newville, now this was the Newville Road, and the town of Newville's over there. Newville had to move because they built a dam and thought they were going to flood it, but they didn't. But Newville's gone now. But the doctor came over, dealt with 3 very sick people. In 2 weeks, he lost the brother and the father. The mother recovered. But he's not sure what kind of poisoning it was, so he actually took some organs out of the dad's body and sent them to Columbus because they didn't have the CSIs that we have today. So they did some of the first autopsies in Columbus. Well, Ceely's mom, and Ceely and her mom are there. They have the funerals. Mom says, we're going to move away. Ceely repoisons mom, like that. So now Ceely is looked at by the sheriff in a whole new light. Like, what happened here? It's a longer story than that, but I'm kind of abbreviating it quite a bit. But the sheriff got her to live with a young lady in Newville. And the young lady told a story. I'm having boyfriend problems. And when Ceely said, well, this is what I did with my boyfriend problems. And then she called the sheriff in. The sheriff listened to the second time Ceely confessed it. And then the girl was arrested. But the sheriff was hiding up in the loft of the building when they shared the story. Like that. Now they took her to trial to Mansfield. She was put on trial. It was a big trial. People all the way from Millersburg came. Now, what kind of coincides with this is about 3 years earlier, somebody in Massachusetts did something like this. Lizzie Borden. Yes. So Lizzie Borden made national news. Ceely made Ohio news, but she is in a book called Haunted Ohio. She's into the chapter called Unrequited Love or something like that. So she was found innocent by reason of insanity. She was on her way to Toledo to be evaluated. Somewhere along the way when she was in Toledo, in this book that just came out, the guy has notes in it, and there's a page that shows from Toledo, she was found sane. So they released her. And she went back to Southern Ohio with her families. And when the people in Richland County found out about it, they all got paranoid, like, she's going to come and poison us. Right. So the sheriff went down there, and he said the way they set her up, they only arrested her on her dad's murder, not her mom's or her brother's. So he kept all of those available to take her to trial again. So he presented that to Ceely. Ceely went back, was finished being evaluated, and then sent to Lima State Hospital. They had just built this brand new facility in Lima, Ohio. And there's pictures in this new book about it. I didn't realize how new it was. And so Ceely was there for the rest of her life. And she became a model prisoner, or not a prisoner. She was a favorite of the staff, it said. And they have a picture of her. She almost looks like she's in an early hospital gown, like a nurse, and she's pounding nails into a piece of wood, showing how productive they could be like that. But she was a model inmate, so to speak. And that's where she died, 1934.
Do you know if there is any truth that her mother helped her cover it after she found out?
In the story, they think the mom knew what happened, but the mom just kind of accepted it, because the second time when mom was still weak after the first time, and then Ceely brought her, when I was sick, mom would she would heat up toast and add milk to it and put butter on it. So it was like, I'm not sure what they called it, but it was good for our stomach. Yeah, milk toast. So we had that. Well, Ceely made that for her mom, and then Ceely brought it to her. They put it aside. They covered it to keep the flies out of it, and then Ceely added poison to it the second time. And when her mom tasted it, she says, this tastes a lot sweeter than it was. And it's implied that maybe her mom knew what was happening, and that her mom kind of looked at Ceely, but because, she just kind of protected her. But mom died doing that too, like that. So that's conjecture, but people talked about that.
Right.
She might have known what's going on. So now people come here. Now, if anybody's haunting that house, it ought to be her mom and her dad and her brother. Not Ceely. She's buried up in Lima. There's still a cemetery there. There's a new state prison there now, but it's no longer that. But the man that wrote the play, he was able to get her locket. So when they put the play on, the girl that played Ceely in the play get to wear the locket. They actually were able to pry the locket open, because Ceely would rub it so much it was locked shut. And they were able to pry it open and not damage it, and there was a picture of her mom and dad in there. During the court trial, Ceely said something interesting. I thought my mom and dad would come back, because whenever dad used the poison on the rats always came back.
Wow.
She never made the connection that it was new rats like that. So some people disagreed just how mentally not quite right she was.
Right.
But the time period, they didn't use nice names for people. Simple Ceely, lazy Ceely, imbecilic Ceely. Those are kind of terms they gave to people that weren't quite right, like that. But she's our ghost, and the ghost hunters were here 9 years ago, and they investigated the house. They investigated up there where Guy lived, and they investigated Mr. Bromfield's house.
Did they find anything?
Well, in the episode, it's on the ghost hunters, and if you look up old episodes, it's called The Family Plot. And it's a very tame episode by their standards, but they tried to energize it a little bit, like, oh, there's a noise, and they go running through the house or something. I don't know. I mean, I was here for some of the nights. All I got to know is we had to open up barns, close places, and drive them around. They were here from 5 in the evening till 5 in the morning. And 3 of those nights, I worked those nights. And all I remember is we ate really well at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were catered in.
Was it Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures?
Ghost Hunters. They were their initials. They were out of New Jersey. They had a logo. And it was funny, when they drove in, they stayed in Columbus.
Taps.
When their cars came, Taps. And when they came in, they put the logos on the side of the rented cars. And then when they left, they took them off. They actually changed the license plates from Ohio plates to New Jersey plates. And every time they showed it, they were driving into Lucas. They said, in Lucas, Ohio. Well, we're 6 miles from Lucas. So there was some kind of different, seeing how Hollywood works.
Right.
Bromfield was known as a sustainable farmer, and he promoted that. But one of the mistakes that he also promoted, he's known for. It's called Malabar Rose. Here's the plant right here. It's on both sides of the wagon. It's got thorns on it. It's a member of the rose family. He promoted it for the Department of Agriculture as a living fence. He didn't live long enough to see the problems of it. It makes a berry. Birds eat the berries. Birds fly around. Birds poop. And when birds poop, wherever they poop, it comes up. Because once the seeds go through the bird's body, it grows everywhere. And so by the 60s, a couple years after Bromfield's dead, the farmers are all having all sorts of new names for Mr. Bromfield, like that. But this is it, Multiflora Rose. And if you look it up online, it came in from Asia in 1850. It was a wonderful garden plant, but in gardens, people take care of it. Out here, it just spreads and spreads and spreads. It's one of those invasive species right now that we're trying to deal with. And if you don't have a place where you watch over it, it's going to take over the woods, basically, is what happens. There's no natural enemy of it at all. No goats or sheep. Yes.
a different question, but
Yes.
so what parts of the Shawshank movie were filmed here?
You know, I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
That where we spotted that cabin. That cabin was the opening scene of the movie.
Really?
When they start the
where he
movie,
killed-
he's on trial.
Yeah.
And then they're flashing back to him drinking and sitting in a car, right where the wagon sat. That's where he was sitting in the car.
Oh, I see.
And so then he's looking at the cabin where his wife's having the affair. And as he's looking at that, they're flashing back. They're talking to him as he's being tried. He's very stoic and not very talkative.
Right.
But they flash into the cabin. One scene where the boyfriend and his wife start to get ready, but then they cut away from that.
Sure.
But they used the cabin. They actually shot a bedroom scene, according to the actor that played the boyfriend. He was here, and his name was Scott Mann. It was the only movie he was ever in.
Oh.
And he said, you know, my name is on screen longer than I was. Like that. So they shot a murder scene in the cabin too, but that made the cutting room floor.
Okay.
So that was the scene up there. On our way out, as we're finishing, I'm coming out of the field, there'll be a sign on the fence that says Shawshank. In the middle of that field was where the tree was. I'll point it out. I'll just kind of point to it.
the big
But
tree.
The tree
big
with the
tree.
money.
But the tree succumbed to high winds
Okay.
over a period of 10 years, and it split the tree. The tree was a 150-year-old white oak,
Yeah.
and it actually had a birth effect. It did this, and the first wind took this down. This stayed up for another 5 years, and then the second wind broke this off. The lady that owned the property, she's hauled the tree away, and she's turned it into Shawshank trinkets now.
Oh, geez. So there's a stone fence.
There was a fence. The only way to see the fence now is there's a show called Aerial America on the National Geographic, and when they do Ohio, the last 5 minutes is Malabar Farm. And as they're flying overhead, the last 5 minutes of that hour show, either they're here, and if they show the tree, they talk about the tree, and then you see the wiggly line of the fence going up. We never could see the fence because it was on the other side of the short little hill. So we never saw that. And the majority of the fence was built for the movie. There wasn't a real traditional fence there, but they built the fence for the movie. It was called Movie Magic. I met the location manager. She was on the wagon, and it was her first job, and she had to find the sites that they shot the movie at that were away from the prison, and there were 13 of them. It stretched from Ashland, Ohio to Upper Sandusky, Ohio. And Mansfield has a book out that shows you where all the sites are at, and wherever there was one, they put one of those signs up. Okay. Thanks for asking it. I do that sometimes. And then we have a hiking trail right here, and 100 yards in, there's a cave back there. If you're into a little bit of adventure, you can walk through the cave. The cave opened up because when ice got between the rocks, it pulled them apart. It's called the Rock City Formation. You're actually allowed to drive up here and park, and then hike to the cave if you'd like to do that. It's kind of a neat adventure. It's about 100 feet long. No one has lived in that house down there for about 15 years, but people have rented it to come and do some explorations for different paranormal groups. We've had to sit with them sometimes while they do that. They've come in at midnight to about 4 in the morning or something like that, and they brought their devices and things like that. The people that settled the valley in 1820, the Shracks. David built what's now the Malabar restaurant. It was a stagecoach stop. The stagecoach went from Marietta all the way to Sandusky, like that. And it had a water source there. That same glacier that stopped created a spring over there, like that. The spring has been running for 25,000 years. His brother Charles built the first house where Ceely Rose's house is. He built the first water mill. By the time they lived there, it had morphed into another kind of newer building at that time. So the two brothers built their homes there. Their mother came with them, but in 1821, Sarah was suffering from consumption and she passed away. So she picked this spot to be buried at. Her comment was, I gotta be in a place where I can keep an eye on my two boys after I'm gone, like that. So Sarah Schrack is in the back row. She's the founding member of what then was the Schrack Cemetery. Now it's called the Olivet Cemetery because it belongs to the township. The Shracks are here, and the Schrack families came about 4 years ago, and on the back of the Schrack tombstones, they put new wording on the back. So now you know where David is, where Charles is, where Sarah, where Susanna, there's other people there. So it's easy to read there, but it's on that side of the stone. Civil War soldier George Boffman is here, 6 months in the Civil War, 3 major battles, survived all of it, but dies of dysentery, living in a camp. A lot of soldiers did die of illnesses because of the conditions that they had. The brownfields are officially the last ones here. They're over here at the 5 flat graves. His dad, his mom, his dad, and his sister, and he and his wife in the front row. His sister has no idea she's here. She died when living in New York during a flu outbreak. When he comes back from living in France, he moves her body here because he didn't like her husband very much. And on her tombstone, it's her maiden name, not her married name. He did put the husband's name in little letters at the bottom, like that. He could be a real opinionated person sometimes, like that. His oldest daughter, we have a stone for her now. She was cremated and buried in Montana, living with her middle sister. When that family sold that property, grandchildren of the middle sister brought their aunt's ashes here a couple of years ago, and they spread them on the farm somewhere, but we put a stone here denoting that Annie's back on the property right now. His youngest daughter lived in San Paulo, South America. She's been there, but she died 2 years ago. Her husband is still living there, and her kids are still in that area like that. So when his daughters were able to take over the farm, he had kind of, in a way, they were a disjointed family. They went to other places, one to Brazil and one to Montana, like that. So can't explain the family dynamics there, other than it was probably uncomfortable. This is the end property. Mr. Bromfield turned that stagecoach stop into 10 guest bedrooms for himself. So the building's almost 201 years old now, like that. And with that, it became a restaurant. His goal was a restaurant, but he never lived to see it. Turned into a restaurant in '63, and has been some form of a restaurant since then, like that. The spring is right next to it over there. You can walk over there, drive over there, and see the water running. But during COVID, someone complained enough about the water that they were afraid of issues with it, that they made the state cover it up. Now it's got a grate on top of it like that. So you can hear the water running, but you can't put your hands in it anymore. And people have a hard time taking it. People were always taking the water away from it. Johnny Appleseed lived in the area for 10 years. He lived in Perrysville, about 6 miles that way. And so while he was here, he lived with a stepsister, and he lived in a house, and he had a girlfriend for a while. And that's in a storybook called Johnny Appleseed by Will Moses, the great-grandson of Grandma Moses. And you can read about it. But Johnny Appleseed was here, and then when the valley got kind of full of people, he started moving farther west. Eventually ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where he died. He was in his 70s when he passed away. This is one of the bicentennial barns. They painted 88 of them. Actually, they painted, if it's a trick question, they actually painted 89. But one blew down, and they had to redo it. They had to do it over again like that. But ours got touched up last year, so it's showing off really, really good. In '57 up till '72, they were still operating this as a farm, to answer your question. And then when the state took over, they had a farm staff of almost 40 people here. There were people working the farm. But by the '90s, they're starting to feel the crunch. They did farm out some of the work to the prison in Mansfield because it was a prison farm. So some of those people, inmates, were coming down to farm. But then the state started cutting back little by little. People retired, they didn't hire them back again. They took the dairy herd and went to Wooster, Ohio to ATI. So now we were just in charge of the crop fields. 3 years ago, they made another change. The change was they leased out these fields to a local farmer. But the hay fields are still ours. So we're raising the cows and the hay, but the crop fields are going to this farmer as long as they practice the similar practices and they do the same kind of crops like that. Last year it was corn, this year it's soybean.